You know, as someone like anybody else that grew up with animation, grew up with cartoons, a lot of us during my generation and previous generations grew up on some of the theatrical cartoons being shown on television. A lot of us were used to seeing cartoons that had been seen in theaters previously being shown on television. But as I mentioned, I think once or twice, a couple of times in audio form, maybe even on camera, some of the cartoons I would witness, along with millions of others growing up, sometimes had some weird premise or weird decisions made. And what I'm talking about by weird decisions, I'm talking about certain scenes that maybe only lasted a couple of minutes, if that. And you wonder, what was the point? So basically that's what this topic of this video is what was the point with these scenes from some of these animated shorts? For example, let's take a look let's go to Disney in the 1940s. Now, just like any animation studio at the time, Disney had their share, if you will, of animated cartoons that were based around the World War. And some of their but then, of course, even though they had those cartoons featuring some of the characters, sometimes after the Second World War, Disney started to get back to basics. And Disney started to get back to basics. And one of the things, and what I mean by getting back to basics, I should say, easy for me to say. But one of the things they would do to get back to basics is they would just start showing and creating original animated shorts for theatrical release. Now, one of these animated shorts that came out in the 1940s after the war, I believe, was a Donald Duck cartoon, which many consider probably one of the weirdest Donald Duck cartoons out there. And what I mean by weird is just the premise of it. Now, some say that in the mid-90s with Runaway Brain with Mickey Mouse, that could be considered one of the weirdest. And it probably is. But then again, is it truly the weirdest? It's probably one of the more controversial ones that Disney did, to the point that, according to some people, Disney doesn't even acknowledge its existence. So, is it the weirdest? Maybe. But I think that honor, though, and many might agree with this, that honor actually goes to the Donald Duck short in 1942, I believe. 1942 or 43, around that time, called Duck Pimples. And it was an unusual premise. Hear me out. And somebody left a tennis racket here. Well, like I said, it was an unusual premise. Hear me out. You see, what was unique about this Donald Duck cartoon, and we had some might say some unique ones in the past. I got 15 minutes. There's no doubt, 15 minutes till I clock in, but there's no doubt there've been some unique Donald Duck cartoons in the past. There's no doubt. In fact, many might recall one of the first Donald Duck cartoons with Daisy in it when she was known as Donna. Heck, I remember that cartoon because basically that was based around. Basically, it was a cartoon based in that they based in Mexico, I guess. And I remember as a kid in that cartoon, Daisy, known as Donna at the time, is in a car which is acting up in Donald's car, which is acting up, and suddenly she gets tossed by accident into the trunk. And I remember as a kid thinking, you don't see, she just gets tossed in there, you don't see her anymore. It's like you don't see no movements, and you're thinking, whoa, did she become one with the car? You're thinking, oh, did she merge with the car, become one with it? Because you don't see no movements, you don't see nothing. It's like the car's acting on its own. It doesn't even acknowledge, you don't see no acknowledgement of Daisy in the back of the trunk or anything. So I thought as a kid, what, she merged with the car or something? But anyway, getting back on topic here, like I said, Disney has had some unique Donald Duck cartoons. But the one that stood out to me as a kid, it was Duck Pimples. I remember this because I remember watching it back when I was for the first time, when I was 4 or 5 years old. And it's always stuck with me because of one situation. You see, one of the characters introduced that would actually have somewhat of a impressive legacy, maybe not as impactful, but more of an impressive legacy, was a character named Pauline. Now, a lot of people would credit Pauline's character in Duck Pimples as being inspiration for Jessica Rabbit's design, or partially inspiration for Jessica Rabbit's design in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. The second time we would see Pauline would be in the mid-'80s. That's right, we would see her in the mid-'80s in a Halloween special, in an all-new animated scene made for a Halloween special. And so was she seen alongside Disney's interpretation of Witch Hazel. Now, with that said, as I was saying, now with that said, Pauline's debut, like I said, with Pauline's debut, she basically left an impressive legacy behind her, but her debut was also unique in a way. It was unique because the premise of the storyline was it's raining outside, and Donald's deciding to stay indoors, and all kinds of and everything starts to suddenly, his imagination, because he's just relaxed, nothing's gonna bother him, he's just gonna let his imagination run free, think about other places he could be in, and like I said, think about other places he could be in. And basically, long story short, he ends up getting this peripheral of books given to him by this imaginary person, by this imaginary guy in a raincoat who acts serious and acts like a child, kind of like that, whatever. So he reads these books, and one of them features the characters like Pauline in it. And all these characters start to come out of the book. And you add this on top of his imagination starting to run wild anyway, from turning off the light and while listening to a radio program. And again, his imagination just through that starts to run a little free. So getting to the point here, all the characters from the book he reads come out of the book and come to life, including Pauline, whose introduction basically shows her unique presence, or the unique impact she had on this short, because you first see her with her arm coming out like a snake, coming out of the book like a snake, and it's like, whoa, that's one way to that's one way to get yourself introduced. And again, so again, she comes out of the book. She pulls herself out of the book, and she's looking for these pearls. And just when she thinks she's found them, but finds out they're nothing but handcuffs in the but she finds out they're nothing but handcuffs. What's the next place she looks for the pearls? After looking through some dresser drawers and all that, and thinking she's found them in the back pocket of the detective or the private investigator, what does she do? She climbs up. She opens up the coat, the jacket of the PI, the detective, and climbs under it. And all you see after that is just two big lumps that are her head and her backside that settle down into like one big overly like mound, two mounds if you will, and then just flatten out as you know the detective is still questioning Donald and wondering about this and that. And then as this progresses, they notice that Pauline has disappeared. Well, the detective they notice Pauline has disappeared, and as the detective is questioning Donald about where she could be, and if he has her to hand her over, what do we see? What presence of Pauline do we see involved while this is all happening? Thinking, what the character's thinking, she's disappeared, she's been kidnapped. We see her arms and her hands coming out of the top of the jacket, doing a little magic lifting up the detective's hat, dumping out cigars, doing a little, rabbit out of the hat magic trick, putting the rabbit back in, putting the hat back down, and then her arms and hands going back into the coat. And you would think, okay, fine, maybe she'll come out. But no, she doesn't, because when Donald doesn't answer the detective, and yet you see Pauline's legs just briefly before I guess they disappear again, the next time you see Pauline's arms and hands, the next time you see one of them at least, is when the detective is calling out for an associate of his, and you see her bring her hand and arm out like this, acting like a bullhorn, kind of increase the volume, and then she's doing the same hand movement that the guy is doing to usher the associate forward. And then the next time after that, you see both arms come out, and you see one arm up scratching the chin, and then the other arm putting some glasses on the detective while he's reading his associate's business card. So again, it makes you want, and again, this is one thing that, as for me, is one of the reasons I remember this cartoon very well. Even back when I was a kid, because it's like, because you look at Disney, you think, there's no way Disney could be this screwed up. I mean, yes, they had certain scenes like in Dumbo and all that with the pink elephants. I get that. Alice in Wonderland. I get all that, but usually with the shorts, they were never like this. They could be creepy and scary in times, but they went, usually with the main Disney cast of Donald, Mickey, and all them, they never, as far as I knew, went in this direction. And some people will even question were the people working on this on LSD or some kind of drug, because a lot of people felt that this was one of the more weirded, more effed up Disney animated shorts out there, starring a prominent Disney character. And they thought it was, like I said, one of the most weird, unique, and if not effed up cartoons out there. And one of the reasons I think they felt that way is the same reason that stood out for me, is when Pauline did her little scene with her climbing up the detective's coat and then acting like his secondary hands and arms and hands. And in fact, I'm not the only one I guess that scene stood out to, because one person on Cartoon Brew mentioned in the comment section when this was being discussed as a topic, one person mentioned in the comment section that they got a kick out of that multiple limb scenario because they've always been a fan of it. But it makes you question, who came up with this? Why did anybody come up with this? Why did they come up with this scene? But it's not the only one either. It's not the only one. It's not the only one. The other one that comes to mind is Parlez-Vous. Now, I've mentioned on length about Parlez-Vous and why I like it and why it's unique to some people. But you gotta question who came up with the decisions that during the cartoon, some of the things that get said, or some of the reactions some of the characters have, happen in a way that normally hasn't happened in a Popeye cartoon at that time. And mostly, who came up with the freaking idea to have Olive say at the end to Popeye that she feels like butter in his hands, and ended up melting into a running pool of butter with just a face on it, with just a smiling face on the pool flowing down the floor? Who came up with this? Because again, just like with duck pimples and the Pauline thing, that is the one thing that stood out to me, is like, that made me remember, it's like, why? You know, it's like, okay, that's kind of unique. But again, it made me question why. Who came up with these? Who came up with this idea? Why did they come up with it? And then later on, even in the cartoons of the 90s, you know, you wonder about certain scenarios. Like Tiny Toons, for example. Europe in 30 minutes. Babs, there's a scene in Europe in 30 minutes where Babs melts into a puddle, taking my time here, melts into a puddle after seeing Princess Diana and Prince Charles, or at least parodies of them. And it makes me wonder why. You know, she's not in love with them, she's not attracted to them. It's gotta be admirable. It's like she's admired by them, she's looked up to them, she's inspired by them. So it makes you wonder if that's the reason. And again, who made the decision to come up with that? What was the decision to add that scene in to Europe in 30 minutes on Tiny Toons? Whose idea was it? And then again, speaking of that, you look at Animaniacs and Minerva Mink's 2 shorts, and you wonder who came up with the scenes where, okay, you had Wilford in his nerd persona melt into a puddle, but yet he could still speak. But however, you have Minerva kind of repay that by kind of to her own what's known as lustful melt, basically melting scene. And yet when she melts, Wilford, in now his werewolf persona, has to pick her up and wring her out like a wet towel, just to restore her, because like I've joked about many times, he could have walked away, gotten something to eat, watched a movie, come back, and she'd still be a melted puddle on the ground. So you wonder who came up with that scene. Who came up with the idea to have Wilford speak after he melts, but yet when Minerva does it, he has to pick her up and wring her out like a freaking towel to restore her. And then, speaking of Minerva, you look at her second cartoon, Meet Minerva, and she melts through her friend's cousin's hands, literally melts in his arms, by splitting in half. And you wonder, well, wait a minute. As we've seen in Moon Over Minerva, even though that was supposed to be the second cartoon, not the first, the guys do some of the things she does. She does some of the things that the guys do when they see her. And yeah, she kind of repeats that process here, but we never saw Newt do a meltdown. So it's like, why? Why her? Were they establishing the fact that she would be the only Animaniacs character out there that, has she done more shorts, anytime she sees an attractive guy, she would melt? I don't know. But again, you question who came up with these decisions, who came up with these ideas. So that's what I wonder. As a fan of animation, I wonder that. So let me know what you guys think. What do you think? What are your thoughts? For some of you that are animation historians or research animation for a living or for a hobby, let me know what you guys think. Why do you think? And I don't want no sarcasm. And I'm asking nicely. I'm requesting and asking nicely. I don't want no sarcastic remarks or anything like that or responses. I just want some, I just want some more reasonable, realistic. I just want some straight answers. Why do you think they came up with it? And, let me know down below. Comment if you like. I gotta head into work now, but let me know what you think. And again, all I'm asking in kind is for some, straight up answers, no sarcastic remarks, no insults, just straight answers. And again, for anybody that is, researches animation, let me know down below. And again, like I said, anybody that researches animation for a living or for a hobby, let me know down below. What are your thoughts? And I'll talk to y'all later.